Here is welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I'm the Reverend Kerry Mueller, half the ministerial team here with the Reverend Dave Hunter. You are most welcome, whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, whomever you love, whether you are Zooming with us this morning or visiting later on YouTube. Are there announcements this morning? I'll get back. No announcements?
I have an announcement.
Yes?
I'm still looking for readers for Christmas Eve. Mary Ryan, are you still available for that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yay. Anybody that's interested, let me know. Oh, good, Linda. Thank you.
You've already got me signed up, I assume.
I think so, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, this is John. So we had a fine walk yesterday, and someone can correct me if the prices are on, but I believe we had planned for January 2nd to meet at Pottstown by the scenic walk down by the river, a part of the trail for our next walk. And the third walk, someone can help me out where that was going to be, Alan, but we have a third one planned sometime then thereafter. Every couple of weeks, we like to get together and socialize and take a nice healthy stroll.
Well, good. Our opening words this morning are from David Pohl. We come to this time and place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all her people one. And Dave, if you would like the chalice. In a virtual room of waiting faces, a virtual flame for a world of dark and light, when we light our chalice, we remind ourselves of who we are and why we are here. We dedicate ourselves anew to the world that may be. Our first hymn is called Rock of Ages, but if it happens that you grew up Baptist, this may not be the one you're familiar with. It is a Hanukkah hymn about freedom and dedication. And after Carly plays number 223, I'll read the words to you that we cannot sing together. Carly? Thank you. Rock of Ages, let our song praise your saving power. You amidst the raging foes were our saving tower. Raging they assailed us, but your arm availed us, and your word broke their sword when our own strength failed us. Kindling new the holy lamps, priests unbowed by suffering, purified the nation's shrine, brought to God their offering. And in lands surrounding, hear the joy abounding, happy throngs singing songs with the mighty sounding. Children of the prophet's word, whether free or fettered, wake the echoes of the songs where you may be scattered. Yours the message cheering that the time is nearing, which shall see nations free, tyrants disappearing. Alan, would you be willing to light the menorah for us now and say the
Yes, yes. And I will also say the prayer, the first prayer for lighting the menorah. I will say it in Hebrew. It reminds me of when I was a child and we used to do this in my house. So the prayer in Hebrew goes like this. I'm reading it now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoso, V'tivonu lehadlik ner shel Hanukkah. We'll try another match. Okay. It's the fourth day, so there are 4 candles. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Take it away.
For meditation this morning, I have some words from Michael Strassfield, who has written a book about celebrating the Jewish holidays. He says, by lighting the menorah, we ignite the flame in our souls, the spark that cannot be extinguished, that will burn not for 8 days, but for eternity. We place the menorah in our windows to be visible to those passing by, just as our inner light must shine against the darkness of evil and indifference, and must kindle the spirits of our fellow humans. Now, may we here contemplate the light within, the flame in our souls, the lamp in the window, signaling our commitment. Will you join with me in a few moments of silence? Amen. And now at this time in our service, we join with many other Unitarian Universalist congregations in sharing what is in our hearts and on our minds. If there's an event in your life or the life of the world that moves you this morning to joy or sorrow or hope or gratitude, please unmute yourself. Dave will drop a stone in the bowl of water so that its ripples will remind us that what touches one of us affects us all. And you can then share a few words with us. Well, I was going to move this so that we could.
I have a concern. I have a concern this morning. I am still concerned about my friend Rosalind, who is in hospice. But I have a joy in that someone has stepped forward and has taken her little dog, Mitzi, into their home where she's probably making lots of trouble.
Hi, this is John. So at Hanukkah, we speak of, peace. We may have many views about the current administration, but I will say at least there seems to be a little breath of fresh air with some Arab countries now establishing relationships with Israel, allowing free transit. I know they're small countries, and I can only hope that this may be a harbinger of larger countries finally, putting down the axe forever and realizing that Israel will not go away, and there is great benefit to establishing friendly relationships.
An email from my brother a few minutes ago, asking if I had seen the obituary in today's New York Times for Drew Days, was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights back when I was at the Department of Justice. Drew is a good person, a good Assistant Attorney General, quite a bit younger than I am, as as far as I can remember. So it's a sad occasion.
And I have a joy this morning. My oldest granddaughter, Brenna, announced that she has been accepted and will attend Vassar College starting next year. So that's a big step in her life and a good one, I think. If there are no more that are spoken this morning, let us remember to hold in our hearts the joys and the sorrows of the whole company of humanity, whether they are spoken and shared or silent and solitary. Now, etymologically, a fellowship in ancient times was a flat tree stump on which a group of people would place and pool their resources, their time, their talent, and their treasure, to do together what they could not do separately. So may it be with us. While you find the donate button on the website, Carly will play another Hanukkah hymn, number 222, Mi Malayel. Thank you, Carly. The reading this morning is from ABC News 10 years ago. During an election season in Delaware, in a senatorial debate at Widener University Law School, Republican nominee Christine O'Donnell, perhaps you remember her, and Democratic nominee Chris Coons clashed over whether the teaching creationism in public schools would violate the First Amendment protection against government establishment of religion. Coons began, "The First Amendment establishes the separation. The fact that the federal government shall not establish any religion and decisional law by the Supreme Court over many decades clarifies and enshrines that there is a separation of church and state," said Coons, a graduate of Yale Law School. "So you're telling me that the separation of church and state is found in the First Amendment?" interrupted O'Donnell. "It is important for us in modern times to apply the Constitution as it exists today and has been interpreted by our justices," continued Coons. "It is important to know that on my side, you have a candidate who believes and supports these things, and on the other side, a candidate who is both unfamiliar with and..." "So you're telling me the separation of church and state is found in the First Amendment?" repeated O'Donnell. "Government shall make no establishment of religion," Coons replied. "That's in the First Amendment?" asked O'Donnell. O'Donnell, you may remember, later posted a statement about her earlier flirtation with the pagan group, saying, "I am not a witch." Coons is still a senator from Delaware. My sermon this morning takes its title from one of the lines of the first hymn we had this morning, "Kindling New the Holy Lamps." Well, Christine O'Donnell was stunned to learn that the Constitution, our sacred Constitution, is the source and center of separation of church and state. Just recently, a Supreme Court ruling exempted religious bodies from pandemic restrictions, thus, in my view, exposing their members to a heightened risk of illness and death or at the very least, we're risking that they may become pariahs and viewed as super spreaders. I wonder if they're trying to establish a death cult. The Supreme Court seems to be moving towards understanding religious freedom as the right of the dominant religion to impose its rules on others. Same-sex marriage, reproductive freedom, the right of same-sex couples to adopt, even birth control all seem to be at risk. 10 years ago, Oklahomans rejoiced briefly when voters approved of a state constitutional amendment forbidding courts from using Sharia law, something that they feared was imminent. They didn't seem to understand that that very same First Amendment already protects them against the imposition of Sharia or any religious law they do not individually choose to embrace. The Oklahoma Save Our State clause would have also forbidden the use of Catholic or Jewish law in cases of dispute within those communities. Fortunately, it was soon overturned. But religious freedom right now feels like it is in a very confused and precarious state. But it's an old story. The Pilgrims came here to establish religious freedom, at least for themselves. They weren't so generous to Quakers and Baptists and indigenous peoples or others who disagreed with their brand of Christianity. Nevertheless, by the time the Constitution received its First Amendment, our spiritual and political ancestors had decided that the only way to guarantee religious freedom for themselves was to guarantee it for everyone. And so we have the First Amendment, which does not allow the establishment of one religion over another. But people will keep slipping back into the idea that they have the only truth, and that proclaiming, promoting, and enforcing that truth is more important than anything else, more important than freedom or justice or compassion, and certainly better than the idea that I might be wrong, and that I should listen to other ideas from other people and promote a civil discourse among all people. And it's been that way for a long time. On this fourth day of Hanukkah, I am reminded that ancient Israel struggled with freedom of ideas and belief. Hanukkah has a long and tangled history with many layers of meaning. The basic story, one that did not get into the Bible, is that as part of the legacy of Alexander the Great, Israel came under Greek domination. One of Alexander's heirs, the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes, decided that unity, and for that you can read conformity, unity of worship was important, and he outlawed Jewish rituals, required the worship of Greek gods, and sacrifice of pigs at the temple in Jerusalem, among other things. Some folks, mainly the upper class wealthy folks, thought it would be great to be imitation Greeks, and they went along with the program, exercising naked in the gymnasium, changing their names from Joshua to Jason, for instance, and even having circumcisions reversed. Others, poor and ordinary people, resisted this so-called Hellenizing, and many of them died for their beliefs. Then one old priest, Mattathias, and his sons, called the Maccabees, that is the Hammers, raised a guerrilla army. And eventually, son Judah Maccabeus succeeded, defeating the Seleucids and liberating Jerusalem. And that's where the miracle happened. The reclaimed temple had to be cleansed of all that Greek ritual and rededicated. But there was only one day's worth of blessed oil for the holy lamps, and it takes a while to prepare more oil and bless it. The single day's oil somehow lasted for 8 days. Triumph! The good guys win. All is well. A holiday to celebrate the military victory and religious freedom. Let's light the menorah and all have a party. Now we can go back to normal. Well, no. Layers upon layers. Many versions of the story, many layers of meaning, what my main source, Michael Strassfield, calls an ambiguous history. Normal may be enticing, but it usually contains elements of injustice and inequity and self-aggrandizement. Eventually, the descendants of the Maccabees, called the Hasmoneans, became wealthy and powerful, and they went the way of the tyrants, and they also Hellenized and began persecuting the rabbis. It would be hard for Judaism to celebrate that, So the focus of the holiday shifted from that unreliable human behavior and a military victory, that unreliable behavior that has a political dynasty and military might, and they moved to the source, the eternal source of justice, equity, and compassion in the form of divine intervention and the miracle of the oil. And other important ideas crept into this celebration. This past week on our in-house television here at Whitehorse Village, we had a show about Hanukkah, and a rabbi explained that one of the meanings of the festivals of light is that no matter how dark and bitter life seems, light will return. A lesson suitable for this solstice season and a message of hope as we enter the pandemic dark winter of rising cases and overwhelmed hospitals. The vaccine is coming, an administration of competence dedicated to protecting all the people. Hope is there. A kindergarten teacher in the show told the children that no matter how young, no matter how small, each person can add their light to the world. And so on 8 nights of Hanukkah, Jews light candles and place them in the window for all to see. Well, as Unitarian Universalists, what are we to make with this? We could just say, well, that belongs to our Jewish neighbors. It's not our holiday, not our questions. And that's true enough. But of course, many of us do have Jewish roots. And thank you for Alan and John for showing us that this morning and explaining things. We do believe firmly in finding religious wisdom in all the world's religions. And so it is ours in some sense. And buried deep in all of this history and ritual are some lessons for us, or perhaps it's one lesson with two faces. First, the struggle for religious freedom is never finally won. It is always before us on the large political stage where some folks would like to declare that this is a Christian nation because our founding fathers were Christians and mention a creator in the Declaration of Independence. Oddly enough, some of those people have finally figured out that the Christianity of some of our founding fathers was not exactly the same kind of Christianity that they claim. And so the Texas School Book Commission, for instance, is downplaying Thomas Jefferson, not because he was a slaveholder, but because he was a deist, a sort of Christian more like a Unitarian than a modern evangelical, but I digress. On the large political stage where Hasmoneans eventually become Hellenizers and Baptists may forget that they were once officially persecuted, sometimes people decide that loyalty to their own truths requires them to suppress other ideas, to enshrine their own beliefs in the form of, say, 10 Commandments on the courthouse lawn, or the official banning of Sharia law. These attempts make my blood boil. We know that if we persecute Muslims today, it will be Quakers and Jews and Unitarian Universalists the day after. Some days, I can't stand to listen to the news. I have to tell you that I first wrote that line 10 years ago. Little did I know how much worse it would get and how impossible to look away. We know now that we must never be complacent about the political condition of our nation. We must keep on the side of love, writing letters, supporting candidates who embrace our values, promoting institutions that advance religious freedom, writing checks when that is called for, marching when necessary. But there's also a less visible stage, the small internal struggle, which is also never fully won. And this too is a lesson of Hanukkah. The miracle of the oil is a symbol of rededication, of cleansing the temple of the defilements of the Seleucids, kindling new the holy lamps. And we are called every day to dedicate ourselves to the values of our faith, internally and externally. Most of us don't look at this in terms of divine intervention, and I don't think the language really matters. What matters is the sense of call. And I must say that I'm so glad that this congregation has been a beacon of religious freedom in this part of the world for over 50 years, and that's something to be proud of. We are impelled by something powerful, something important, something bigger than we are. It may be an idea, a feeling, a memory, a hope. For some, it may be an entity, a divinity. For others, it may be something nameless, inherent in the universe, the source of justice, equity, and compassion. One summer at SWUSI, that's the Southwest UU Summer Institute, a sort of UU summer camp, the Reverend Aaron White gave the so-called sunset talks. He's a brilliant preacher with the power and style of an old-time revivalist. He spoke about the joys and challenges of being red state Unitarian Universalists. He talked about his fundamentalist Christian past, about the power of his baptism as a young moment. He describes that moment when you first draw the first breath as a newly born person again. It meant a lot to him. In the long run, the limitations of the theology attached to that moment diminished his fervor, and his faith evolved towards Unitarian Universalism. But he asked us, what do we have? What do we have to offer people that will shake them to the core? And he answered that question in 4-hour-long talks filled with stories and songs that may be summed up in one simple diagram and one memorable phrase. The diagram was a series of concentric circles, and the outermost he calls what? What are we? What do we believe? What makes us different from our more orthodox neighbors? We spend a lot of time on that what in our congregations. What committee, what lecture, what words are acceptable or poisonous? What layer? What should we do next? One layer in comes the how. How to be a congregation, how to care for one another, how to make things work. But at the center, he puts why. Why are we here? Why do we make this what and how? Why should we care? Why are we willing to make this faith the center of our lives? And for many in his SWUSI audience, it is the center. We need to answer this question and to answer it with passion and commitment. Instead, we so often get stuck on the how or the what, or even spend a lot of energy on the outer reaches of what not, as in, we're the people who don't tell you what to believe. We don't bring Bibles to church. We don't use that word. We don't do anything that looks like those other people over there. Aaron reminded us about the whys. We are here to make the world a better place. We are here to create a home in which each person can live in the integrity of their own identity, sexual, intellectual, theological, what have you, and respect the identity of that person over there. A place where we can come together to agree on some things and disagree on others, but always to make a place so safe for civil discourse that people are willing to enter into areas of discomfort and uncertainty. But we must also grapple with the why. Aaron summed up the why this way. There's no point, he said, in going to all the trouble of creating and maintaining a church or a fellowship or a denomination unless it is the place where people can change their lives by an encounter with the transforming power of love. An encounter with the transforming power of love. Only transformation is powerful enough to make the effort worthwhile. Getting past the old pains in our lives, moving past addictions, moving towards clarity of purpose and embodying what we value most. The transformations that call to everyone. We are not here to be a social club of like-minded people. We are not here to feel apart from our neighbors because we are free of their superstitions. We are not here because we're better than anyone else. We are here to be like the woman who called into NPR's Talk of the Nation once in memory of her son's friend who had died of AIDS. How was it, the host asked, how was it to be supportive of gay and lesbian rights back then? It wasn't difficult, she said. I'm a Unitarian. My religion is social justice. We're here because a person whose language and metaphors are grounded in Christianity and can sit with a person who sees the world in starkly intellectual humanist terms, and together they can be moved by a person who lives by a Buddhist practice, who calls them to join in a day of service on behalf of homeless families, or work towards fair districts, or maybe someday raise money to send our own youth to a training to make them more effective leaders in the next round of transformation. And when they have taken their action to bless the world, together they can reflect on what they have done and how they've lived up to our Unitarian Universalist principles and whether they would do it differently next time. And then they can come together at our services, whether they call that worship or something else, to be renewed and refreshed and filled with the courage and energy and will to be moved again and go out and find the next way to bless the world. And they may call that cycle of action and reflection and renewal spirituality, or they may call it something else, but they will be changed in the process and they will change the world. We are here to make ourselves vulnerable to that encounter with the transforming power of love, no matter how it presents itself. Aaron held before us a vision of our congregations as the place where these encounters would take place. And I would hold this vision before you also. The late noted congregational consultant Peter Steinke talks about congregations who have lost their sense of mission drift, he calls it. And he also describes several congregations in different situations, learning to cope with change and create mission-based change. Congregations which have what he calls spiritual spunk. They hold out an example to us. Here's how he describes their experience. First of all, they demonstrated a readiness to work on change over time and with and through emotional reactivity. Oh yes, messiness erupted in each case when changes were implemented. Secondly, the leaders were ready to lead as well as to endure the necessary timeline, not of months, but of years. And finally, each church had a sense of its mission and implemented programs and services that reflected this mission. Steinke points out that we need leaders of courage and commitment, but that we also need the members to be ready to work on change, to persevere through the ups and downs. The energy for change, for renewal, for spiritual spunk must come from the congregation. When we join this Unitarian Universalist congregation or any UU congregation, we are committing ourselves not to a creed, but to a covenant, a promise to one another that we will work towards genuine religious freedom in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, that we will try to embody justice, equity, and compassion, and that we will help our congregation to embody these values. Every one of us, old or young, rich or poor, new or long time, with leadership skills or dogged commitment, every one of us has the ability and the sacred duty to add to the light that we can make together. We are coming to a time of challenge and renewal. With the light finally flickering at the far end of a dark tunnel, the nation and our congregation can hope to come together in person sometime next year. We can look forward to hugs and grandchildren and potluck meals and singing together. But the old normal is not going to be adequate. The pandemic and the political divisions and the highly visible killings of people of color have revealed in undeniable starkness the racial injustices and the economic inequalities, the social fragmentation embedded in our society. There is so much work to be done to build back better. What do you want to do next? How do you want to do it? Who do you want to be? And why? It's time for us as a nation, as individuals, as a fellowship, to rededicate ourselves to our highest values, changing ourselves by an encounter with the transforming power of love. It is a challenge, whether we are talking about individuals developing their sense of mission or a congregation working together to make that mission a reality in the world. This has been at the heart of the human spiritual endeavor since the dawn of time. Hanukkah reminds us that a rededication is an ever-present necessity. And may this season, may we commit ourselves to kindling new, the holy lamps. Amen, shalom, and blessed be. And Carly, will you play hymn number 1, Prayer for This House? as Dave extinguishes our virtual flame, today the holy lamps abound. We extinguish the light of the chalice, moving its light to our hearts, where it will inspire us throughout the week. The menorah candles have burned, perhaps they've burned to the end, but they will be renewed each day throughout Hanukkah, shining in windows throughout the world to celebrate the constantly renewal, the miracle of dedication made visible. May the holy lamps of rededication be kindled within us, and may we shine with a fire of commitment this day and every day. Amen, shalom, and blessed be.